Forget the NFL, forget the UFC. I found the most extreme sport in all of history, and it is insane. This isn't a game about points. You are literally playing for your life. Picture this, you're on a solid stone court, wearing almost no protection, and a 9-pound solid rubber ball is flying at you at bone-shattering speed. There are no timeouts, no refs to save you, just a screaming crowd and the sound of rubber destroying flesh and stone. One wrong move, one tiny hesitation, and you are done. This was the Mesoamerican ball game, a sport where players were gods, and the ball itself was a weapon. So, why wouldn't you survive it? The answer is more insane than you can possibly imagine. To understand why this game was so deadly, you first have to understand why they even played it. This wasn't a weekend hobby. It was a sacred ritual, a reenactment of the craziest story in their entire culture. For civilizations like the Maya, the ball court wasn't just a field. It was a literal gateway to the underworld, a terrifying place called Shib. The game itself retold their most important myth, the Popol Vuh. The story starts with two pairs of god-tier twin brothers, all legendary ball players. The first pair were so good and so loud that they annoyed the actual lords of death who ruled the underworld. The gods were so mad about the noise that they summoned the twins to their realm. After a bunch of cruel tricks, the brothers were defeated and sacrificed, and one of them had his head cut off and hung in a tree. It's crazy, but the story doesn't end there. In a wild twist, the head of the dead brother fathered a new set of twins, the legendary hero twins Hunahpu and Zbolonk. These two were born for greatness. They were also incredible ball players, and you guessed it. They also got summoned to the underworld to face the same gods who killed their family. But these twins were geniuses. They outsmarted the gods, survived all their death traps, and finally beat the lords of death at their own game. After a ton of sacrifices and rebirths, the twins literally ascended into the sky and became the sun and the moon. So every single time a game was played, the players weren't just on a team. They were channeling the hero twins, fighting the forces of darkness to keep the sun and moon in the sky. The stakes weren't just winning or losing. They were cosmic, and the dangers were just as real. The number one reason you would not survive this game: the ball. This is not a normal ball. It was made from solid vulcanized rubber, a process these guys figured out thousands of years before anyone else. They mixed tree sap with morning glory vine juice to create a material that was ridiculously strong and brutally bouncy. Archaeologists have literally dug up these rubber balls, and they date back to 1600 BCE. That means this technology is over 3,500 years old. But this wasn't just smart, it was a creation of a weapon. The balls used in the big leagues could weigh up to 9 pounds, at the same as a bowling ball. Now, imagine that 9-pound bowling ball being launched by pro athletes across a stone court. The force would be unreal. A direct hit to your head or chest would be catastrophic. Spanish writers who saw the game said players were so badly bruised, they had to be cut open just to relieve the pressure. A direct hit to the stomach could literally kill you instantly. This ball didn't just bounce, punished. To them it symbolized blood and life. But on the court it was a constant threat of death. The rules of the game only made the danger even crazier. It was played on a long, narrow court shaped like a capital I, with high stone walls. You had a few players per team, and the main goal was to hit that 9-pound ball back and forth using only your hips or thighs, nitrogen monoxide hands or feet. Just think about the athleticism that takes. You have to dive and twist on a solid stone floor to hit a bowling ball missile with your hip. If you miss hit, you don't just lose a point. You could slam full speed into a solid stone wall. The game was a ridiculously fast and brutal mix of volleyball and racquetball, but played with a cannonball in later versions. They added these tiny stone hoops high up on the walls. Getting the ball through one was basically impossible, and if you did it, you won the entire game on the spot. But most of the time, you lost points if you failed to return the ball or let it hit the ground. The constant, violent hits and the unforgiving stone court meant every second of the game was a physical nightmare. Players would finish a match bloodied, bruised, and broken if they were lucky enough to finish at all. So, you have a 9-pound ball flying at you on a stone court, and the game itself is a cosmic battle for the fate of the universe. Do you still think you'd survive? The odds are not good, and we haven't even gotten to the most insane part. If you're fascinated by this dive into history's most brutal sport, do us a favor and hit that like button right now. It really helps out. Now, let's talk about the ultimate price of playing. With all this insane danger, players weren't totally defenseless. They wore special gear to protect themselves and help control the ball. The most important piece was a heavy belt called a yoke worn around the waist. The ones used in games were probably made of thick leather or wood to absorb some of the ball's insane force. They also wore pads on their knees and elbows, and sometimes even helmets. Some players even used stone gloves called monopolists to hit the ball. This gear was critical, but it was not a guarantee of safety. Think of it less like modern football pads and more like a gladiator's loincloth. It might stop you from dying on the very first hit, but it wouldn't prevent the agony, the deep bruises, or the broken bones that were just a normal part of the game. Today, modern players of Ulema, the game's surviving version, are described as being perpetually bruised, and that's with a much lighter ball. For the ancients, the gear was simply the difference between a terrible injury and certain death. This brings us to the most terrifying and debated part of this entire sport: human sacrifice. Movies have burned the image of the losing team being led to their death into our minds. But the real story is way more complicated, and honestly even more chilling. The link between the game and sacrifice is 100% real. In some of these carvings, the blood spurting from the sacrificed player turns into snakes or plants, showing that their death brings new life. The Popol Vuh myth itself is all about sacrifice in the ball court. But who was actually being sacrificed? Here's where it gets crazy. Some people think it was captured enemies or the captain of the losing team. But there's another insane theory that it was the winners who were sacrificed. In this version, winning the game proved you were the absolute best offering for the gods. Being sacrificed wasn't a punishment. It was the highest possible honor, a direct ticket to the heavens to make sure the universe kept running. So, what's the truth? It probably depended on the culture and the time period. A game between rival cities might end with the losing king getting his head chopped off, while another game might see the winning captain willingly give up his life. What we know for sure is that for many of these games, death wasn't just a risk, it was a guaranteed, and sometimes even desired, outcome. So, why wouldn't you survive this ancient sport? It's not just the 9-pound solid rubber ball breaking your ribs. It's not just the unforgiving stone court. It's not even the very real possibility of being ritually sacrificed at the end. You wouldn't survive because this was never just a game. It was a physical, spiritual, and cosmic challenge of insane proportions. It was a sport where players became gods. The court was a doorway to the underworld, and the final score could decide the fate of the sun and moon. A modern version, Ulama, is still played today in Mexico, but it is a mere shadow of the original's intensity. To survive the ancient Mesoamerican ballgame, you needed more than skill. You needed to believe you were part of something bigger than you, and a willingness to pay the ultimate price, not for a trophy, but for the entire world. What do you think is the most dangerous sport in history? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And for more journeys into the most extreme corners of the ancient world, make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on. Thanks for watching.